The sacrifice of Vessantara. The lineage of the Civis is best known for its charity and sacrifices in the Indian traditions since time immemorial. Once, the Bodhisatta was born as Vessantara, Sanskrit Vishvantara, in the dynasty of the Civi in the kingdom of Jetutara. King Sanjay was his father and Queen Fusati was his mother. He appeared to be a child prodigy because he spoke on the very day when he was born. Interestingly, on the same day, a white elephant was also born. This elephant, who was given the name Pachaya, was gifted with the supernatural power to make the rain fall. Vessantara's passion for charity was so intense that the earth trembled when he pledged to make a great gift at the young age of 8. At 16, he married Maddi, Sanskrit Madri. He had 2 children, Jali and Kanhajina. At that time, there was a great drought in Kalinga. So, 8 Brahmins from Kalinga came to Vessantara to beg for his white elephant to make the rain fall in their country. Vessantara acceded to their request and donated the elephant. When the people of Jetutara heard of this news, they were terribly disturbed. Agitatingly, they went to the king and asked him to punish the prince by banishing him to the forest of Vankagiri. The will of the people eventually prevailed, and Vessantara had to go on exile, much to the unwillingness of the king. Before setting out, he obtained the king's consent to hold an alms-giving ceremony called the Gifts of 700s, Satta Sataka. On the occasion, he gave away 700 pieces of 700 kinds of things to the needy people. When Vessantara took leave of his parents and was preparing to depart, his wife Maddi insisted to accompany him with her children, Jali and Kanhajina. They left the palace in a royal chariot drawn by 4 horses. On the way, 4 Brahmins met him and begged for his 4 horses. After giving the 4 horses to the Brahmins, when he began to fasten the girth tightly round his waist, to put himself under the yoke and to drag the carriage, there appeared 4 yakhas in the form of red deer. They put their shoulders under the yoke like well-trained, excellent horses and drew his carriage. When Maddi was staring at them with joy and surprise, the Bodhisatta said,
"Lo, the influence of the benevolent forest of the hermitage, that the best of the deer extend hospitality to the forest guests so ardently."
The queen, however, remarked, "You may conceal your merits and say so, but I call this to be your influence, like the laughing lotuses which surpass the beauty of the stars mirrored in the water, exposing so fully to the curious gaze of the radiant moon with its groping rays for the delightful titillation." When they were thus involved in the pleasant conversation, they encountered one more Brahmin beggar who begged for the carriage. So Vessantara had to part with his carriage too. He then lifted his son Jali in his arms, and Maddi lifted Kanhajina, and thus they continued their journey on foot. The sun was scorching, so the cloud overspread overhead to act as a canopy. The trees extended their branches to offer them delicious fruits as an offering to their virtue of charity. When they longed for water, the lotus ponds appeared before them to quench their thirst. Further, the yakhas shortened their path to protect them from exertion. Thus, treading through Suvarna Giritala, Kantimara, Mount Aranjagiri, Dunnivitha, the capital of Cheta, where his uncle ruled, Gandhamadana, the foot of Mount Vipula, to the river Ketumati, where a forester offered them food, and then by crossing the river Nalika along the bank of Lake Muchalinda and further crossing a dense forest, they finally reached Vankagiri. Vissakama, the engineer of Sakka, had already built 2 hermitages for them in the forest. One was for Vessantara and the other was for the rest of the family. The power of Vessantara was so strong that no wild animal came near their hermitages. Happily, they spent 4 months. One day, one old Brahmin named Jujaka came to the hermitage when Maddi had gone to the forest to bring some fruits for the family. Accosting Vessantara, he begged for his 2 children, because Amitta, his wife, had demanded for 2 slaves for herself. As Vessantara was widely known for his dan paramita, perfection of charitability, the greedy Brahmin was intent on exploiting the situation. Vessantara tried to convince the Brahmin to change his mind in several ways. Yet, he insisted on accepting nothing but the 2 children. Knowing Jujaka's mind, the children were extremely terrified and ran away to a nearby pond and hid themselves. They, however, reappeared when their father called them. And by then, Vessantara had finally agreed to the shrewd demand of Jujaka. The Brahmin, then chanting some phrases of benediction to the donor, ordered the children to accompany him. The children, who did not want to leave, glued to the feet of their father to ask Jujaka to wait at least until the arrival of their mother. But the shrewd and mean Jujaka, without wasting time, fastened the hands of the 2 delicate children with a creeper and forcibly dragged them to his destination. The bleeding and bewailing children, however, screamed, "Oh, the mother will certainly cry, like the Chataka bird upon return, whose little ones are killed. How would she act when she comes back with many roots and fruits, gathered from the forest, but finds the hermitage empty? Oh, father, I have many toys, horses, elephants, and chariots. Give half to mother to assuage her grief." When Maddi returned late in the evening and did not find her children around, she asked Vessantara of their whereabouts. But Vessantara kept silence. She then repeated the same question several times, yet Vessantara did not utter a single word. So she again went inside the forest and looked for the children for the whole night. Next morning when she returned, she fainted. Vessantara then helped her regain consciousness. That was the time he apprised her of the whereabouts of the children and narrated the story. By then, Maddi had mustered up the courage to endure the trauma. Surprisingly, she praised Vessantara's great act of dana sila, conduct of charity. Their sacrifice trembled the earth, and so did Mount Sinaru with all its resplendent gems. Surprised, Sakka, the lord of the Devas, inquired into the cause. When he learnt the cause of the quakes owing to the sacrifice of Vessantara, he visited the hermitage next morning to test the firmity of his vow in the guise of a mendicant and begged him for his wife. Even then, Vessantara did not lose the firmness of his mind and nodded to donate Maddi as well. Besides, no anger sprang even in the heart of Maddi. She did not wail. She rather looked stupefied and stood like a statue, with her eyes fixed on her husband with a fresh load of suffering. Admiringly, Sakka then said,
"Though a householder, yet giving up the most beloved children and wife in charity, with such detachment, can there be a greater exemplification of magnanimity?"
Now it was the time for Sakka to reveal his identity. He gave Maddi back to Vessantara. Furthermore, he offered 8 boons to the great donor, which included the reunion of his family, his recall to the father's kingdom, and his ability to benefaction. In the meanwhile, Jujaka had travelled 60 leagues, and having lost his way, he reached Jettutara, though he intended to reach Kalinga. His rugged appearance and harsh behaviour with the 2 delicate children attracted the royal guards, who brought him before the king. King Sanjay, when saw his grandchildren and learnt their story, he bought them back from the cruel Brahmin in lieu of handsome gifts and a 7-storied palace. But Jujaka could hardly enjoy those riches, as he died of overeating in a few days. The king, along with Fusati, Jali and his army, then marched to Vankagiri to bring back his son and the daughter-in-law. The white elephant, Pachaya, also joined the procession, as he had just returned from Kalinga, as no one could subdue him there. Finally, after a month of merrymaking in the forest, they all returned to the kingdom.